Cowboy promised he'd marry the Apache girl who saved him. Years later, she returned for him. The Arizona sun burned high in the sky, casting a golden glare over the endless stretches of desert. Cacti and scrub brush dotted the rugged landscape, and the distant mountains shimmered in the heat. A lone cowboy rode slowly along a dusty trail, his horse's hooves kicking up small clouds of sand with each step. He was a young man, tall and lean, with a weather-beaten hat pulled low over his eyes and a leather satchel slung across his shoulder. His name was James McAllister, though few on the frontier knew him by anything but Jim. Jim had been traveling for days with little more than his horse, a few supplies, and the hope of reaching the next town before nightfall. He had always been a careful man, but the desert had a way of testing even the most experienced travelers. The air was dry and scorching, and the wind carried a faint taste of dust and sage. The trail ahead seemed endless, twisting around rocks and disappearing behind jagged cliffs. Yet Jim kept moving, determined to make it through this stretch alone. Suddenly, the quiet of the desert was broken by the sound of hooves and shouts in the distance. Jim instinctively gripped the reins tighter and scanned the horizon. 3 men appeared over the ridge, riding fast and shouting something he could not quite hear. Before he could react, one of the men aimed a gun in his direction. Jim tried to turn his horse, but it was too late. A shot rang out and he felt a sharp pain in his shoulder. Ah! His horse reared, throwing him to the ground, and he tumbled onto the hard, sun-baked earth. Dazed and struggling to catch his breath, Jim realized he was badly injured. Blood seeped from his wound, and the pain made his vision blur. He knew that if he stayed there, the outlaws would catch him, and he would have little chance of survival. He tried to drag himself toward a rocky outcrop, hoping to find some cover, but his strength was fading fast. The sun beat down relentlessly, and the heat made it hard to think. Panic threatened to take over, but Jim forced himself to stay calm. He had survived many challenges in his life, but this one felt different. Just when hope seemed lost, a shadow fell across him. Jim looked up to see a figure moving gracefully toward him. It was a young girl, her skin the warm brown of the desert earth, her dark hair tied back in a simple braid. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent, scanning him quickly to assess his condition. She carried a small bundle, and with swift, sure movements she knelt beside him. "Are you hurt badly?" she asked in a soft, clear voice. There was no fear in her tone, only concern. Jim nodded weakly, unable to speak, and she looked him over, noting the wound on his shoulder and the dirt caked on his clothes. Without hesitation, she lifted him gently and guided him to a shaded area under a large rock overhang. For the first time since the attack, Jim felt a small sense of relief. He had been alone, and now someone was here to help him. The girl worked quickly, using her bundle to clean the wound and bind it with strips of cloth. She murmured softly as she worked, her hands steady and confident. Jim tried to speak, to thank her, but the words caught in his throat. He had never expected to meet anyone out here, let alone someone so capable and brave. "My name is Kaya," the girl said finally, as she carefully tied a knot to secure the bandage. "You were lucky. They could have killed you." Jim managed a weak smile. I owe you my life," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. The words felt inadequate. How could he ever repay someone who had saved him from death? Kaya shook her head. "Don't worry about that. Just rest. You need to regain your strength before moving again." She looked around, as if considering the best place for him to stay. Then she nodded to herself and stood. I know a safe place nearby. Come with me." Supporting him as best she could, Kaya led Jim through narrow trails hidden among rocks and small trees. The desert seemed less hostile with her guidance. She moved like someone who knew the land intimately, stepping carefully over loose stones and guiding him away from dangers he might not even notice. Despite his pain, Jim was impressed by her knowledge and confidence. It was clear she was not just brave, but also wise beyond her years. After what felt like hours, they arrived at a small clearing where a modest shelter made of wood and hides stood. Smoke rose gently from a fire pit, and the faint scent of herbs filled the air. Jim was exhausted, but relief washed over him. He knew he was safe. For now. Kaya helped him inside and sat him down on a soft mat. She moved to the fire and began preparing a simple meal, humming a quiet tune as she worked. As Jim rested, he took in his surroundings. The shelter was humble but clean, decorated with simple tools and personal items that spoke of a life connected to the land. Kaya returned with a bowl of warm stew and handed it to him. He took it gratefully, savoring the warmth and the nourishment it offered. "You should eat," she said gently. "It will help you heal." Jim nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude that went beyond words. As he ate, he watched her move around the shelter, tending to small tasks with care and attention. There was a quiet strength about her, a calmness that made him feel safe for the first time in days. Despite the pain in his shoulder and the fear that still lingered in his mind, he felt a spark of hope. Over the next few days, Kaya cared for Jim with dedication. She cleaned his wound regularly, ensured he ate enough, and even made small poultices from herbs to ease the pain. Jim found himself slowly recovering, though he knew it would take time before he could ride again. During this period, they talked whenever he felt strong enough. He learned that Kaya was part of the Apache community nearby, skilled in tracking, healing, and surviving in the harsh desert environment. She had grown up learning these skills from her elders, and her knowledge of the land was unmatched. Despite the difference in their worlds, Jim felt a deep connection to her. There was an unspoken understanding between them, built from shared moments of quiet and the intensity of the situation that had brought them together. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jim found himself speaking words he had not planned to say. "Kaya," he began, his voice soft but earnest, "I don't know if I'll ever have the chance to thank you properly, but I promise, if I survive this, I will come back for you. I will marry you one day." Kaya looked at him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. She didn't speak at first, but her expression showed a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and something deeper that Jim could not quite name. Finally, she nodded slowly. "If you truly mean it, then I will wait." The promise hung in the air between them, fragile yet powerful. Neither could predict the future, and the world around them was uncertain and often dangerous. Yet in that moment, a bond was formed, one that would endure long after the desert had returned to silence. As night fell, Jim drifted to sleep, feeling a sense of peace he had not known in days. He was no longer alone, and he had someone who cared for him, someone who had risked her own safety to save his life. Kaya sat quietly nearby, watching over him as the stars appeared one by one in the vast desert sky. The world was wide and unpredictable, but for the first time in a long while, hope had returned. And so, under the endless Arizona sky, the cowboy and the Apache girl began a story that neither of them could have imagined. One of courage, survival, and a promise that would shape the course of their lives for years to come. After the days of recovery had passed, Jim felt stronger, though his shoulder still ached when he moved too quickly. Kaya had been a constant presence, tending to him with care, sharing stories of her life and her people, and teaching him about the desert that surrounded them. He listened eagerly, fascinated by her knowledge of the land, the hidden water sources, the plants that could heal or harm, and the ways the animals moved through the wilderness. Each lesson she gave him seemed to reveal a world he had never truly understood, a world both beautiful and harsh, full of secrets and wisdom passed down through generations. Despite the comfort of her shelter and her care, Jim knew that he could not stay forever. The promise he had made to Kaya, the one he had spoken in that quiet evening beneath the glowing sky, was strong in his heart, but so was the call of his own life beyond the desert. He was a cowboy, accustomed to traveling, working, and seeking opportunity wherever the frontier led him. He could not abandon his responsibilities entirely, yet leaving meant separating from the person who had saved him in a moment when he had thought all hope was lost. Kaya seemed to understand the conflict within him. She watched him quietly one morning as he practiced riding his horse again, guiding him through the rocky trails that led out from their hidden clearing. She offered advice, cautioning him about dangerous paths and the signs of approaching storms. There was no pressure in her voice, only guidance, gentle but firm. Jim felt a mix of gratitude and sadness as he rode alongside her, realizing that he would soon have to make a decision that neither of them could predict the outcome of. During the afternoons, as Jim rested and healed, Kaya shared stories of her childhood. She spoke of the small village she had grown up in, the elders who taught her the ways of the land, and the ceremonies that connected her people to the seasons and the stars. Jim listened with wonder. He had never heard such tales, and yet they felt alive, as if the desert itself had breathed them into being. Each story deepened his admiration for Kaya, not just for her bravery in saving him, but for the strength, intelligence, and spirit she carried. The bond between them grew, quiet but profound. They worked together to make the shelter more comfortable, gathering firewood, preparing food, and even tending to a small garden of herbs that Kaya used for healing. Jim found himself learning from her, not only about the desert, but about patience, resilience, and the importance of connection. There were moments of laughter, shared meals, and long walks along the cliffs where they would watch the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange, red, and purple. In those moments, it felt as though time had slowed, and the outside world, the dangers, the responsibilities, the uncertainty, had vanished. Yet, even in these peaceful times, Jim could not ignore the reality of the world beyond their clearing. He knew that he could not remain hidden forever. Supplies were running low, and the desert would not wait for him to recover. He began preparing for the journey back to civilization, making plans to leave in a way that would ensure Kaya's safety. He promised himself that he would return for her no matter how long it took, but the thought of leaving filled him with a sense of unease. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep shade of indigo, Jim spoke with Kaya about his plans. They sat by the fire, the flames flickering and casting shadows on their faces. "I have to go back," he said softly, his voice heavy with emotion. "There are responsibilities I cannot ignore. But I promise, Kaya, I will return for you. No matter what it takes, I will keep my word." Kaya looked into his eyes, her expression calm but resolute. "I know," she said quietly. "I trust your promise. I will wait as long as it takes. But you must promise me something too." Jim raised his eyebrows, curious. "What is that?" "You must take care of yourself," she said firmly. "Do not let danger catch you off guard." Do not let your promise to me end because of carelessness. You are strong, but the world is not always kind. Be careful, Jim. He nodded, feeling a deep respect for her wisdom. He had always known that Kaya was brave, but now he understood that her courage was matched by insight and foresight. He felt both grateful and humbled. The next morning, Jim prepared to leave. He packed his saddlebag with the supplies he would need for the journey, ensuring that Kaya had enough provisions to continue her work safely while he was gone. He mounted his horse, pausing for a moment to look back at the small shelter, at the girl who had saved his life and who had captured his heart. "I will return," he said again, his voice steady despite the tightness in his chest. "I promise you." Kaya smiled, a quiet, serene smile that seemed to carry both sadness and hope. "I will be here," she replied. "I will wait." As Jim rode away, the desert stretched out before him, vast and unforgiving. The trail was long, and he faced challenges along the way: rough terrain, unexpected storms, and the ever-present dangers of the wilderness. Yet, through it all, the memory of Kaya guided him. He thought of her courage, her kindness, and the promise he had made, and it gave him strength to push forward, even when the journey became difficult. Meanwhile, Kaya returned to her people. Life among her community was demanding in its own way, filled with responsibilities, traditions, and daily tasks that required skill and attention. Yet, even as she immersed herself in her own world, her thoughts often returned to the cowboy she had saved. She remembered his gratitude, his respect, and the vow he had made beneath the setting sun. Though the years stretched ahead of them both, she held on to that promise, believing in it as one might believe in the certainty of the desert sunrise. The separation was not easy. Both Jim and Kaya felt the emptiness left by the other's absence. Jim missed her wisdom, her laughter, and the quiet strength she had offered him when he had been at his weakest. Kaya missed the determination and courage of the young cowboy, the way he had trusted her, and the hope that their bond represented. Yet, in that distance, they each found the resolve to continue with their lives, knowing that the promise between them was a thread connecting their hearts across the miles. Over the months, Jim traveled from town to town, working wherever he could, trading goods, and learning more about the wider world. Each town brought new experiences, some exciting, others challenging. Yet through every hardship, he carried the memory of Kaya, and it gave him strength. Her bravery and skill were a constant reminder of the kindness that existed even in a harsh world. And though he met many people along the way, none could replace the girl who had risked her life to save his. Kaya, too, faced her own challenges. She worked with her people, learning and teaching the skills needed to survive and thrive in the desert. She helped the sick and the injured, guided travelers who strayed from the safe paths, and ensured that her community remained strong and connected. Yet, in quiet moments beneath the stars, her thoughts drifted to Jim. She remembered his promise, the firelight in his eyes, and the certainty in his voice. That memory gave her hope, a quiet assurance that some promises, even across great distances, could endure. Years passed. Seasons changed, bringing scorching summers and cold winters. But Jim continued his life as a cowboy, moving from place to place, always carrying the memory of Kaya with him. He never forgot the promise he had made, and though the world offered many distractions, he held on to the vow as one might hold on to a lifeline in turbulent waters. For Kaya, time also moved forward. She grew in skill and wisdom, becoming a respected member of her community. Yet her heart remained connected to the cowboy who had once been her charge, the man who had promised to return for her. She waited patiently, knowing that some things were worth waiting for. even if the years seemed long and uncertain. Though separated by miles, by different worlds, and by the challenges of life on the frontier, the bond between them remained. It was a bond built on courage, trust, and the promise that had been spoken beneath the setting sun. Well, and though they did not know when or if they would meet again, each carried the hope of reunion, a hope that would sustain them through the trials and adventures that lay ahead. Time passed and the years rolled on like the wind across the desert. Jim McAllister continued his life as a cowboy, traveling from town to town, ranch to ranch, always working hard, always moving forward. He became known in many small frontier towns for his honesty, courage, and the way he treated people fairly. Folks would tell stories about the quiet cowboy who helped neighbors with difficult tasks, sometimes at his own expense, but they had no idea of the story he carried deep in his heart. The story of the Apache girl who had once saved his life. Though his life appeared full and busy to anyone watching, Jim felt a quiet emptiness inside him. No matter how far he rode or how many towns he visited, he could never forget Kaya. Her face, her voice, the kindness in her eyes, all stayed with him, as vivid as the first day she had found him injured in the desert. He often recalled the way she had guided him through the rocky trails, her calm confidence, and the quiet strength that had helped him survive. Her memory had become part of his very being. He tried at times to distract himself with work and people. He formed friendships, shared stories around campfires, and even spent time with women who admired him. Yet, no matter what he did, none of them could fill the place in his heart that Kaya had carved. Her courage, her wisdom, and the promise they had shared remained unmatched. Each night when the stars appeared and the desert seemed endless, he would think of her and whisper the vow he had made so long ago, "I will return for you." Meanwhile, Kaya lived her life in a different but equally challenging way. She remained with her Apache community, taking on responsibilities that tested both her skill and her patience. She guided the young in survival skills, helped the elders with healing, and protected her people from dangers that sometimes came from the unforgiving land around them. Her knowledge of herbs, water sources, and the desert trails made her an essential part of her community, and yet, beneath her daily work, her thoughts often returned to Jim. Every season she would remember the young cowboy lying injured and weak, trusting her completely. She remembered his gratitude, the way he had promised to return for her, and the deep sincerity in his eyes. Even when she was busy with her duties, teaching the children or preparing for a journey to trade goods, she would sometimes pause in thought and imagine the day he might come back. The years did not weaken her hope. If anything, they strengthened it. She believed that the promise he had made was real, and she clung to it as one might cling to a lifeline in a stormy river. Despite the distance, Jim and Kaya were connected by that single, unbroken thread, the promise. They each faced their own worlds, filled with challenges and responsibilities, yet they carried the memory of each other as both a comfort and a source of strength. For Jim, it reminded him why he endured long days of labor, harsh weather, and the loneliness of the road. For Kaya, it reminded her why she continued to teach, heal, and protect, even when the tasks were difficult. Their bond had become invisible but unbreakable, a silent force that guided both of their lives. Years brought changes. Jim became more established as a cowboy, earning the respect of townsfolk and fellow ranchers alike. He learned new skills, faced dangerous situations, and helped those in need wherever he went. Yet, he never allowed the world to dull his memory of Kaya. Sometimes, while sitting by a campfire or riding across open plains, he would imagine her voice guiding him, reminding him to be careful, to survive, and to keep his promise. Her memory became both a companion and a compass. Kaya, too, grew stronger in her own right. She became a source of guidance for her people, a healer whose remedies were sought even by travelers passing through the desert. She learned more about the ways of the world beyond her village, observing the changes in towns and trading routes as traders and explorers arrived with news. Yet, her heart remained connected to Jim. She often wondered what he was doing, where he had traveled, and whether he had faced hardships or dangers along the way. The distance tested their connection, but it did not break it. If anything, it made the promise between them feel even more sacred. In the towns Jim visited, he occasionally heard news of Apache communities and their interactions with settlers. Though he rarely sought it, he listened carefully, hoping, always hoping, that somehow news of Kaya might reach him. Sometimes he met travelers who had seen young women with strong skill and courage living among the Apache, and a quiet excitement stirred within him. Could it be her? Could she still be waiting, as he had promised? Each fragment of news kept his heart alive with anticipation. Yet, life had its ways of testing patience. Jim faced challenges that made him question whether he would ever return to Kaya. Harsh winters made travel dangerous. Bandits and outlaws threatened the trails. Sometimes a fever or injury would slow him down, forcing him to rest in towns far from where he wanted to be. He endured it all, but each difficulty reminded him of what was most important: the promise he had made, the life he had vowed to share with the girl who had risked everything to save him. Kaya also faced trials that tested her resolve. The desert was beautiful, but it was also merciless. Water could be scarce, storms could appear suddenly, and wild animals posed threats. She worked tirelessly, often putting her own safety aside to help others. Her courage and skill kept her people safe, but she sometimes worried about Jim. She imagined him riding across vast plains, facing dangers alone, and hoped he was keeping himself safe. Her heart ached at the thought of him enduring hardships without her by his side, yet she trusted in the bond they shared. Even as years passed, their connection remained alive. Jim would occasionally take out a small notebook he had kept hidden in his saddlebag, filled with notes about the desert, towns he had visited, and thoughts he had written down in moments of quiet reflection. On the last page, he had written her name, Kaya, and beneath it, the promise he had made. Sometimes he would read it by the light of a campfire, remembering her words and the warmth of her smile. The memory gave him courage, reminding him that one day their paths would cross again. Kaya, meanwhile, kept a small token that Jim had left behind, a piece of cloth from a satchel, folded carefully and stored in a safe place. Whenever she faced a difficult decision or a moment of uncertainty, she would touch it, feeling the weight of his promise and the certainty that he had meant what he said. It reminded her that even across years and distance, their hearts were still connected. Though their lives continued on separate paths, a quiet rhythm governed them both. They worked, they learned, and they endured hardships, but beneath it all, hope persisted. Hope that the promise made beneath the desert sun would one day be fulfilled. Hope that the cowboy and the Apache girl, separated by miles and circumstance, would finally reunite. The promise had become more than words. It had become a guiding light, a reason to persevere, and a testament to the power of faith, courage, and love. And so, life went on. Jim continued to ride, to work, and to face the challenges of the frontier, while Kaya tended to her people and the land she knew so well. Their paths seemed forever apart, yet each step they took, each challenge they overcame, kept the promise alive. Though the years stretched on, they never wavered in their commitment to each other. In the quiet moments, beneath the stars or amidst the rush of daily life, their hearts remained connected, bound by a single vow that neither time nor distance could erase. Little did they know that their patience, their courage, and the strength of their bond would one day lead to a reunion beyond what either of them had imagined. For now, they continued to live, to grow, and to endure, holding on to hope as the guiding force that would, in time, bring them back together. Years had passed since Jim McAllister had left the desert where Kaya had saved his life. The promise he had made to return to her had never left his mind. And even as he built a life in towns and ranches far from that hidden canyon, her memory remained a guiding light in his heart. Each sunset reminded him of the quiet evening beneath the desert sky when they had first spoken the vow, a moment that had felt both fleeting and eternal. Jim had become known across the frontier as a capable, honest, and dependable cowboy. He had worked many ranches, faced storms and bandits, and earned the respect of townsfolk wherever he went. Yet, beneath his reputation and the busy life he led, a quiet longing lingered. No matter how full his days seemed, no matter how many people he met, his heart still belonged to Kaya. The years of separation had only deepened his feeling that their reunion was inevitable, though he could never predict when or how it would happen. Meanwhile, Kaya had lived through her own years of growth, challenge, and responsibility. She had become a respected figure among her people, a healer and guide whose knowledge of the land and its resources was unmatched. Travelers often came seeking her advice, and she helped the young and old alike to navigate the harsh realities of desert life. Still, despite her busy life and the passage of years, her heart had never strayed from Jim. She thought of him often, imagining the day he might return and wondering whether he had kept himself safe. Each memory of him, the warmth in his eyes, the gratitude in his voice, the promise he had spoken, kept her hope alive. One day, word reached Kaya through travelers and traders. A cowboy matching Jim's description had arrived in a nearby town. The news stirred her heart like a sudden wind across the desert plains. Could it truly be him? The years had changed many things, but her hope told her this was not a coincidence. Without hesitation, she prepared for the journey to find him. She packed her essentials, ensuring she had the herbs and supplies she might need, and set out across the rugged desert, guided by both knowledge of the land and the memory of the man she had never forgotten. Jim, in the town where he now worked, continued his daily routine, unaware that the threads of fate were drawing them together. He helped neighbors repair fences, traded cattle, and shared stories around the local saloon. Life was steady, familiar, and yet, beneath the surface, he felt a sense of anticipation he could not explain. The frontier had a way of bringing surprises, and deep in his heart he could almost feel the desert wind carrying something important, though he did not yet know what. When Kaya arrived in the town, the reaction from the townsfolk was immediate. Travelers and locals alike noticed a striking young woman moving with confidence and grace, her presence commanding respect without demanding it. Some whispered about her skill, her courage, and her knowledge of the land. But those whispers did not matter to her. Her focus was only on finding Jim, the cowboy who had once been injured, saved by her hands, and had promised to return for her. She asked quietly, politely, and with determination about the man who fit his description. Each step brought her closer to the moment she had long imagined. Then, finally, it happened. Jim had been tending to a small herd of cattle outside the town when he noticed a figure approaching, moving with the kind of confidence and purpose that immediately caught his attention. Their eyes met for the first time in years. Time seemed to slow, as if the world itself had paused to witness the reunion. Jim's heart leapt, and for a moment, the years of distance, struggle, and waiting fell away. "Kaya?" he said, his voice almost a whisper, though it carried across the space between them. She nodded, a soft smile lighting her face. "Jim," she replied, her voice steady, calm, yet filled with emotion. "I came for you." The two stood facing each other, the memories of the past mingling with the reality of the present. Jim could see that she had grown stronger, wiser, and even more radiant than he remembered. Kaya saw the man he had become, capable, confident, and still carrying the same integrity she had admired so many years ago. In that moment, the distance, the challenges, and the years apart seemed to vanish. They embraced, not just as two people reuniting after a long absence, but as souls finally finding the connection they had been promised. Jim held her tightly, as if afraid that any weakness in his grip might undo the years of longing and hope. Kaya rested her head against his chest, feeling the strength of his heartbeat, and knowing that the vow they had shared so long ago had endured. The townsfolk watched quietly, sensing that this was a moment of deep significance. Though no one understood the full story, they could see the sincerity and depth of the connection between the two. It was a reunion that seemed almost destined, a bond unbroken by distance or time, and it inspired a quiet awe in those who witnessed it. After the initial shock of reunion, Jim and Kaya began to talk. They shared their experiences over the years, the challenges they had faced, the moments when hope had wavered, and the memories that had kept them going. Jim recounted his travels across the frontier, the people he had met, and the dangers he had faced. Kaya spoke of her life with her community, the skills she had honed, the people she had helped, and the quiet longing that had always remained for him. Each word deepened their connection, reminding them that despite years apart, their hearts had never been separated. As the days passed, the townsfolk noticed the change in both of them. Jim moved with a lightness and confidence that seemed renewed, and Kaya's presence brought calm and admiration to those around her. Opening his eyes, together they walked the town, shared meals, and spoke to neighbors and travelers alike. Yet their focus remained on each other. There was a quiet joy, a sense of completion that neither could have anticipated but that had grown naturally over the years. One evening, beneath the stars, they sat together outside the small town. The sky was clear, and the desert wind carried the scents of sage and distant pine. Jim took Kaya's hand in his, the warmth of her skin familiar and comforting. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said softly. "Every day, I hoped this moment would come." Kaya squeezed his hand gently. "And I never stopped believing," she replied. "I waited, knowing you would return. And now you are here." The promise they had spoken so many years ago was no longer just words. It had become a reality, a testament to their faith in each other and in the bond that had begun beneath the desert sun. The years apart had tested them, strengthened them, and prepared them for this moment. They knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but together they could face anything. The reunion marked a turning point not just in their lives, but in the hearts of those around them. People began to speak of the cowboy and the Apache girl as a story of hope, courage, and loyalty. It was a tale that reminded others that true promises could endure, that love and trust could survive distance, time, and adversity. Jim and Kaya, once separated by circumstance, were now united by choice and by the strength of their bond. In the days that followed, they made plans for the future. Jim wanted Kaya to see more of the world he had traveled, while Kaya hoped to share with him the life and traditions of her people. Together, they envisioned a life that honored both their worlds, a life that respected the land, their communities, and the promise that had guided them for so long. And though the years apart had left their marks on them both, the reunion brought a sense of peace and fulfillment. The cowboy who had once been lost in the desert and the Apache girl who had risked everything to save him were finally together, proving that even in a world full of uncertainty, promises made from the heart could be kept. The desert, which had once separated them, now seemed to celebrate their reunion. The wind whispered through the sagebrush, the mountains stood as silent witnesses, and the stars above shone brightly as if acknowledging that the bond between Jim and Kaya was unbreakable. Their story was no longer one of waiting or longing, but of reunion, resilience, and the fulfillment of a promise that had endured through time. And so, beneath the vast sky and amidst the enduring beauty of the frontier, Jim and Kaya began the next chapter of their lives together. The years of separation, struggle, and hope had led them to this moment, and they embraced it fully, knowing that their bond was not only real, but eternal. They had found each other again, and nothing could ever take that away. After years of waiting, struggle, and separation, Jim McAllister and Kaya finally found themselves together. The reunion had been more than they could have imagined. It was a moment of relief, joy, and quiet wonder. Yet, even as they celebrated, they knew that life would not simply pause for them. The frontier was wide and unpredictable, filled with challenges, responsibilities, and opportunities. But now, for the first time in many years, they could face it side by side. Jim had grown into a man of experience, strength, and wisdom. He had traveled across the frontier, faced dangers, and worked tirelessly to build a life of respect and honor. Kaya had grown too, mastering her skills, guiding her people, and protecting her community. Both had faced hardships and endured distance, but their resilience and the promise that had kept them connected now became the foundation for the life they would share. They began by settling in the town where they had reunited. It was a small, quiet place with dusty streets, wooden buildings, and a tight-knit community. The townsfolk welcomed Kaya warmly, impressed by her skill, confidence, and the way she carried herself. Many had heard the story of Jim, the honest and brave cowboy, and now they witnessed the reunion that had been long awaited. The town, which had once been ordinary in its daily rhythms, now felt charged with excitement, hope, and admiration for the pair who had endured so much to find each other. Jim and Kaya worked together to make a home. They found a small plot of land near the town and built a modest house, combining their knowledge and skills. Kaya designed a garden filled with herbs and vegetables, using her understanding of the land and the plants she had known since childhood. Jim helped construct the house, build fences, and create a stable for horses. Each task brought them closer as they worked side by side, learning from each other and appreciating the strength, intelligence, and care that the other brought to every effort. Their days settled into a rhythm that felt natural and fulfilling. In the mornings, Jim would tend to the animals and take care of the land, while Kaya focused on the garden, preparing meals and creating remedies from the herbs she grew. Afternoons were often spent together riding across the plains, exploring the nearby mountains, or walking along the desert trails that Jim had once traveled alone. They shared stories, laughed together, and sometimes sat quietly, simply enjoying each other's presence. The simple moments, sharing a meal, watching the sunset, tending to animals, became treasures, marking the beauty of ordinary life shared with someone who truly understood you. Kaya also began teaching the local children and townsfolk about survival skills, plants, and healing techniques. Her knowledge, once shared only within her community, became a source of fascination and respect for those around her. Jim supported her efforts, helping her carry materials, build shelters, and guide people safely through the surrounding wilderness. The couple became known not just for their story, but for the positive impact they had on the town. People admired their courage, their skill, and the way they complemented each other perfectly, each strength balanced by the other's wisdom and care. Despite the busy days, Jim and Kaya never lost sight of the emotional bond that had brought them together. They often reminisced about the past, the moment when she had found him injured in the desert, the promise they had spoken beneath the setting sun, and the years of waiting that had finally led to their reunion. Those memories reminded them of the depth of their connection and the strength of their commitment. Each time they spoke of it, they felt a renewed sense of gratitude for having endured the hardships of separation and for having remained faithful to the promise that had carried them through the years. The couple also began making plans for the future. They wanted to see more of the land Jim had traveled, to visit the towns he had worked in, and to experience the wider world together. At the same time, Kaya wanted to share her knowledge of the desert and the traditions of her people, teaching Jim and anyone willing to learn about the land's secrets, the plants and animals, and the ways of living in harmony with nature. They dreamed of a life that honored both their histories, a life where her knowledge and his experience combined to create something meaningful and lasting. Life was not without challenges. The frontier remained unpredictable, with sudden storms, difficult travel, and the occasional encounter with those who did not respect the land or the people who lived there. Yet, Jim and Kaya faced every challenge together. Where one lacked knowledge or skill, the other provided guidance. Where one grew tired, the other offered support. Their partnership was no longer just emotional, it was practical, built on mutual respect, shared experience, and a deep understanding of each other's strengths. One of the most remarkable aspects of their life together was the way they balanced independence and unity. Kaya remained connected to her people, visiting her community regularly, sharing her wisdom and helping guide them through challenges. Jim supported her, understanding the importance of her heritage and the role she played among her people. At the same time, he shared his experiences and skills, helping her navigate the parts of the frontier he had learned over years of travel. Their lives were intertwined, yet each retained the individual strength and identity that had first drawn them together. Evenings were often their favorite time of day. After the work was done, they would sit outside, watching the stars emerge in the wide open sky. They spoke softly about the future, their dreams, and the memories that had carried them to this point. Sometimes they were silent, simply holding hands and listening to the sounds of the desert, the wind rustling through sagebrush, the distant howl of a coyote, the gentle murmurs of the night. These quiet moments were filled with contentment, a deep sense of belonging, and the understanding that they had finally found the life they had longed for. As the years passed, Jim and Kaya's life together became a source of inspiration for those around them. The story of the cowboy who had promised to return and the Apache girl who had waited patiently spread, told and retold by those who admired courage, loyalty, and love that endured through time. Their lives became a living example that true promises, made from the heart and honored with patience and determination, could indeed be fulfilled. They faced old age with the same grace and resilience that had carried them through their youth. Their home remained a place of learning, warmth, and safety. Travelers seeking guidance or refuge found it freely given, and the townsfolk came to rely on their knowledge and generosity. Even as time etched its marks upon their faces, their bond remained unbroken. The years had added wisdom, patience, and depth, but had not dulled the love that had begun all those years ago beneath the desert sun. Kaya often looked at Jim and remembered the moment they first met, when she had found him weak and injured in the desert. She reflected on how far they had come through separation, waiting, and the challenges of the frontier to find a life together. Jim would sometimes do the same, recalling the courage and care that had saved his life and the unwavering patience that had kept her heart loyal through the years. Each memory reinforced their gratitude for the journey they had shared and the life they had built together. Their story was, in the end, not just about love or promise, but about resilience, courage, and the power of trust. They had faced the harshest parts of life, endured separation and uncertainty, and still honored the vow that had brought them together. Their lives became intertwined with the land, the community, and each other in a way that felt timeless. Every sunrise and sunset reminded them of the journey that had shaped them and the promise that had endured. In the quiet moments, when they sat side by side watching the stars, they often held hands and smiled, feeling the deep fulfillment of a life lived fully and faithfully. The desert, the mountains, and the plains that had once separated them now seemed to celebrate their union. The promise that had started as words spoken in the fading light of a desert evening had become the foundation of a shared life, full of meaning, purpose, and love. Jim and Kaya lived out their remaining years with contentment and joy, knowing they had found not only each other but a life built on trust, patience, and unwavering commitment. Their story remained a testament to the enduring power of a promise, showing that even across time, distance, and challenges, love and loyalty could guide hearts back together. And as the sun set on the frontier, it painted the sky in the same brilliant colors as the day their vow had first been spoken, bright, beautiful, and eternal.